Like I said, Shawn Pickens. Shawn, thanks for joining us
Thank
from
you.
Parks and Rec.
Thanks for having me.
You're going to tell us a little bit about yourself. So just fill us in and everybody who doesn't know you out there and tell us what you do.
Okay. I'm Shawn Pickens, and I'm relatively new to the city of Frankfort Parks Department. Anyway, I worked for State Parks, Kentucky State Parks, prior to coming to Frankfort. So I was working in Frankfort, worked at some parks out in the field, Lake Cumberland and Rough River State Parks, and then came to Frankfort in the old Capitol Plaza Tower before they imploded it, and I was working in the tower for almost 7 years. So we lived in Frankfort and met my wife. She's not from Frankfort, but when I was living in Frankfort, met my wife, and so then moved away from Frankfort for a while and was working in Shelbyville as the director of Parks and Recreation in Shelby County. And then about 6 years after that, working there, the Frankfort position came open, and I always loved Frankfort for my first go around, and working for state parks and being able to travel the state and doing different things. So when the opportunity arose, I was very fortunate to be able to come back to Frankfort, and there was a lot of great candidates that were for the position. So I was very fortunate that they selected me. So I'm a graduate of Marshall University, which is out of Huntington, West Virginia, which is where I'm originally from. I'm from Huntington, grew up there, went to school there.
The Thundering Herd.
Thundering Herd.
Yeah.
Nice. I'm a big Marshall fan. Yeah. But ever since I've graduated Marshall, I've lived and worked in Kentucky, and a lot of that's been in Frankfort. So Frankfort's kind of my second home. So
Nice.
and I hopefully will be here for quite a few years to come. So
tell us, so you are the director of,
Yes, sir.
Of Parks and Recreation. Tell us a little bit about what that job entails.
yeah, how long do we have?
As long as you need, really.
Yeah, a lot of people, kind of have misconceptions sometimes about Parks and Recreation, and a lot of those are true. We do play a lot, and we do try to get out and have fun, and have a lot of activities for the kids and adults and senior citizens, and we do play a lot and have a lot of things to do. But there's also a lot of behind the scenes administrative things, budget talks, UC work sessions and city commission meetings and stuff. So we're heavily involved in a lot of those, and we're dealing with the general public on a daily basis, and a lot of times we're dealing with children. One of our, if not our most precious commodities. I have 2 young boys myself, and they're playing on playgrounds, they're swimming in swimming pools. They're walking trails, they're playing in sports, which you all have talked about, and there's inherent dangers to all of those. So as administrative staff, such as myself and the rest of my team at the Parks Department, there's a lot of liability. We're constantly working with the city attorney and our insurance companies, and we're constantly looking at ways to improve things and make things safer, because on a daily basis we have a very high liability that we have to deal with, and so we got a lot of serious things behind the scenes. So it's just not all fun and games all the time, which a lot of people think that that's just kind of we're out there playing baseball all day long.
Sure.
Which some days we are, but really 80% of my time is, budget works, liability works, insurance works, improvements, getting certifications, staying certified currently on inspections, and being able to just keep facilities safe and upgraded for the public.
Yeah.
So,
well, and you have, several parks kind of under your jurisdiction that you have to deal with. So give us kind of a general background of like the park system, how many parks we have, where they're located, stuff like that.
Yeah, we have 9 parks, 10 if you include St. Clair Mall.
Is it really? It's considered kind of a park?
It's kind of quasi.
Okay.
Our downtown parks department, led by Christian Wilkins and his crew, they take care of a lot of St. Clair, but we kind of partner with Public Works with the city and the street department, so it's not just us, but it's kind of all the landscaping and stuff is maintained by the parks. And you all know there's a lot of entertainment things going on down there, and we work with folks like DFI and the street department and help them with those kinds of things. So it's kind of a quasi park. So a lot of our maintenance staff works down there. So we kind of call it our 10th park, if you want to say. Yeah. So they're located throughout the city, pretty generally you want to try to have them equally dispersed. So one side of a city or one area of a city is not, more lopsided than the other. So, we have like Juniper Hill on one side and East Frankfort on the east side, and Riverview Park downtown, and Cove Spring kind of on the northern side, Capitol View southern side. So, but they're kind of spread out through the city. So
right, Juniper is definitely one of those crown jewels, I'd say, in the Parks Department.
Yeah.
Tell us about. We've heard about upgrades coming. Tell us about those.
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, liability is a huge thing on parks, and playgrounds and swimming pools are the number one liability risk that Parks and Recreation has. So when I only started about 10 months ago, going on 11 months now. So one of my first, missions for me when I came in the Parks Department was just kind of review our safety of our facilities and things. And playgrounds and pools obviously were at the top of the list for those reasons I stated. So playgrounds has been a focus. They're very heavily used at all of our parks. And so Juniper Playground was, after inspecting and reviewing all of our playgrounds throughout the city, Juniper was at top of the list of it's our most heavily used, but it was also the one in the worst condition. And there was plywood boarded up, and we had some caution tape on it, and it was just bad. It just didn't look good on the Parks Department in the city. So that was one of my first priorities. So I came in right at budget time. So I mean, literally, I sat down at my desk and like, here, create a $3.4 million budget for us. So I'm like, oh, thank you. Yeah,
great.
First day on the job. So I was trying to factor in all the other safety items, and it's what I was really focusing on. So Juniper Playground was one of the first to get designated to be replaced. So I had to get that into the budget on terms of other big projects and stuff that's going on too. So I've got a picture of it if you want to see it.
Oh, sure.
What's coming.
Yeah.
This is what's coming to.
Yeah, you can hold. Yeah.
However you want to hold it up there to the camera. So that's what's coming to Juniper. The schedule for that is the end of this month or early to mid-February, just depending on weather. And if we get a lot of rain coming in and stuff, it might delay them and push them back. But for sure, by the spring of this year, this will be installed at Juniper. So
yeah, it looks really nice.
Yeah, it does look nice.
It'll be a great addition to the park, and it will alleviate a ton of liability on us. Yeah. When brand new playgrounds come in, the installers have to meet today's current code. And
speaking of that, I'm noticing this little space age merry-go-round right here. This does not look like the iron death traps.
It is not the merry-go-rounds of old. Yeah, it is the 2020 standard merry-go-round.
I mean, that defeats some of the fun that we had. You just spin that sucker as fast and kids go flying, man.
It spins pretty fast. It's got a controller on it, so it doesn't spin as fast. But
nice.
one cool thing about that you pointed out is it's wheelchair friendly.
Great.
Oh, that's awesome.
You can go right up to it, and it's got handles, and you can slide off the chair, and you can
really
go right
cool.
on it, and then you can, depending on your abilities, you can spin it yourself, or you can have friends spin it for you too. So
that's great. Well, speaking of upgrades to parks, I know we've got some upgrades to Dahlia Graham Park too, right? Is there a timeline for those?
We're actually meeting about that today. That was another large priority of mine when I first came on. That basically, with the budget, it was also Dahlia Graham. We want you to get it done. So I have been working on it diligently with some community input. It's basically renovating the entire park. The original plan coming in was a little smaller scope. It was just focusing on the playground and the splash pad area. Currently, where the small basketball court is now, I kind of expanded the scope just to provide another option. I said, hey, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. So of course, budget always comes in and whatever. So I pitched to our city manager and our leaders, a broader option and expanding the whole park, including the basketball courts across from the playground. Potentially looking at a multi-purpose, instead of it just being basketball, maybe it's also tennis, or maybe factoring in a tennis court of some kind, maybe factoring in a small dog park. Dog parks are very popular now, especially in downtown areas where people don't have big yards. So Dahlia Graham is a perfect location. Somebody wants walking their dog, they can come there, let them off their leash, and they can be free without having to worry about going out into the the street or something. So we're looking at that as a possibility.
Okay.
Just kind of expanding the scope down there. So too. So hopefully, we're really hoping this year. You'll be seeing some ground moving. I'll be shocked if we don't, but you should see some ground moving this spring.
Let's talk about the official park of Cable 10, and that's East Frankfort. East Frankfort Park is right up the hill from us, from the studio here, and we spend a lot of time up there, try to get our walks in when we can. Tell us about plans for East Frankfort Park. We've noticed there have been some upgrades and improvements up there. Can you tell us any other plans that are?
Yeah. I wouldn't say there's anything concrete now. We're not as far along on East Frankfort's general plan as we would say Dahlia Graham. But it's also been a focus. General infrastructure for East Frankfort Park is a major need. Sidewalks, roads, entryways, lighting, parking lot lighting, trail lighting. It was definitely on the list, the wish list. Demolishing the old swimming pool that's over there it's just dilapidated, and it's just really it's just an eyesore, and it's not really useful for anything.
Yeah, you're talking about the building now, because the pool itself has been filled in.
The pool's already been filled in several years ago.
So there's talk of demolishing
that building? There's talk of demolishing that and basically reapplying the use.
How do we use that space?
Yeah. And like I said, there's no concrete plans in just yet of exactly what's going to go back there. I've got some ideas floating around. One idea is right now we've got 2 smaller playgrounds kind of at either end of the park. We've got 2 small, very old shelters that have been, unfortunately have been vandalized a lot and things like that. So one idea is to, where the old swimming pool is now, is just to create a centralized, large-scale pavilion for picnicking and family reunions and weddings or whatever the case might be, with a very nice bathroom and restroom facility attached to it, and then very close to it a brand new playground, exclusive, a bigger scale than even this, just because there's so much more room over there that we got to work with. That's one idea, and we've got several ideas on the table. So.
I love the fact you guys are talking about it and thinking about it for sure, and the idea of trying to utilize that space in the middle of the park where the swimming pool used to be.
We want to take down the big black prison fence.
It's like 9 or 10 foot.
It's
fences.
just you go to a park, you don't want to see a big 10-foot with razor wire. That's just not inviting. So we're planning on removing all of that, demolishing. And at the very least, demolishing that and just opening up to green space at the very least for now, and then come up with a good plan to reutilize that. So
and unfortunately, weather, I think, events caused the tennis courts to be torn down. Basically,
they were torn down before I started, but they, from what I gather, and I used to play tennis there too when my first go around in Frankfort, and they were kind of in rough shape then. That area has some preliminary plans as well. And all this is still kind of open for discussion. We need a lot more community input, and of course, budget always factors in or whatever. But a couple of things that we're potentially looking at for that area is like for lack of a better term, a senior legacy park, which would include some cornhole board, design, shuffleboard, bocce ball, if you've ever seen the movies where, like in New York City, they've got the concrete chess and checkers, something, cool. But more modern, today's standard, have check and checkers where they can come and just play and be active, have a gazebo and have some lightweight workout equipment for senior citizens to be able to use and things like that. That's
so that
one
kind of
option.
Plays into the pickleball courts that are there.
Exactly. It ties in with the pickleball courts, exactly. Another thing we're looking at is, potentially, and this, like I said, it's just some ideas, is like a Special Olympic park of some kind. Having some specialized equipment for Special Olympics, to where it's it's for children with disabilities and things like that, and work with Special Olympics of Kentucky, and maybe have some have some special games here and things like that for those folks. So that's another idea that we're tossing around. But it kind of all that we're hoping to roll in with all the other improvements and park things around the city. Roll that into a comprehensive master plan for the parks, and that way that factors in budget and scope and get all the community input that we need and things like that. So
that's really exciting.
Yeah.
I know we're pretty hyped about that since we come to that park all the time.
Yeah.
But speaking of excitement, there's been a lot of talk about the lighting and potential field upgrades at Capitol View Park, and specifically the Sauer Soccer Complex there. What the status, what you can kind of share with that moving forward? I know they mentioned it on the city commission work session.
There's nothing concrete yet. We need lighting at Sauer, but we also need lighting at the softball fields and the baseball fields. Lakeview Park, that we partner with the county, also needs lighting. So there's a lot of lighting needs throughout the city and county. So it's kind of that jockeying. Do we just do Sauer? Do we expand it to include the other ones? Do we do the other ones first and then Sauer, or Sauer first and then do the others? So there's some things that have to fall into place. Because as you heard, the schools are also trying to get in on the turf game and wanting to. So, if we end up turfing fields at the schools, then the Sauer Soccer Complex will not be as needed. I mean, it'll still be used, but the soccer folks will then go to the schools, so there won't be as big of a need for lights. Not saying that they're not needed, because our plan is to continue with Sauer Soccer Complex. If it's not the high school's home field, then we're looking at bringing in large scale travel tournaments, high school tournaments. The Class A, All A Classic, the regional tournaments and things like that. So we're not going to do away with Sauer by any means. So it still needs lights. It's just the timing. When do we spend that money to put them in? So.
Would you say that's the biggest effect for Parks and Recreation, is just that decision that'll be made for the high schools, and if they do change their fields to turf?
That's definitely factoring in there. It's definitely factoring there. And another huge factor is Capitol View. First of all, it's not technically our property.
I was surprised to hear that on Monday. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we've got don't hold me to it. It's either like a 4 or 5 year lease that gets renewed every 3 or 4 or 5 years
from the state, right?
From the state, and that allows us to use this. We have serious doubts that they would ever come in and want to take that property back and use it, but technically they could. You never know. They may want to build a new office building or whatever the case might be. I believe the state police is technically state police's property, if I'm not mistaken. So that's another hurdle. So spending millions of dollars on property that's not technically yours. Obviously, no brainer. But I know city officials, a city manager, and I've also been in some talks about, getting a very long-term lease, 50 years, whatever the case might be, or even potentially turning that over to the city so that it's actual city property. Then that would be much more, feasible to start spending a lot of money in infrastructure down there. So then another major factor for us is Capitol View itself is used by a lot of groups. There's a lot of other groups outside of just soccer that uses it. There's youth football. The Frankfort Youth Football Alliance is down there as well. And we don't want to leave them out because they play a lot of games down there too. So, if we start turfing fields, they're going to want to be in the game too. So we don't want to leave them out. So we're not leaving them out. We're keeping them in the discussion. And there's baseball, softball fields. We've got 8 or 10 other fields down there that also need a ton of work. We could sink $1 or $2 million easily into those as well. So we don't want to forget the other user groups as well, because there's a lot of folks that use that park. So
I think
trying to jockey all that is tough.
It's a lot.
It's tough.
Right. I think that's some good information for all our viewers out there, because it is a complicated situation.
It is
a lot of moving pieces that people I don't think knew. We didn't know that Parks and Rec doesn't own that. So there's so much that goes into it. And David Hecker is watching out there right now, and he supports installing turf fields at the high schools, but he said he'd really like to see innovations at Capitol View Park.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's when you put all these factors together, it's like it is more complicated than you would have thought.
There is going to be renovations at Capitol View. It's just figuring out the timing, figuring out the budget, and trying, smartly spending the money when, and getting it in a succinct order. Before we can put turf down there, the lights have to go first. Because to install the way the park is configured, to be able to put the lights in, they have to drive their large trucks on the field and put their downriggers down to set those huge posts So if you have turf out there, those downriggers are going to dig down into it and destroy your turf.
Yeah.
So then you have to go back and spend a couple $100,000 just to replace the turf that you just damaged. So the lights got to go in first. Yeah. There is no sewer at Capitol View. There's all on septic tanks, small septic tanks. So if we turf the fields and then we bring in a big, large tournament, then even now with regular fields and having just the All-A Classic tournament, which is a decent-sized tournament, in one day our septic system overflows, which causes problems. So right now we have a sewer project down there that's going to hopefully be done this year to connect Capitol View to sewer. And then that way we can expand our restrooms down there because that's much needed. There's 2 toilets at Capitol View for the entire park. Mm-hmm. So that is a huge concern. So we got to connect to sewer and expand our restrooms, and there's a whole lot of other things, lighting, restrooms that need to be done, with turf at some point, and before we can bring these large groups on a weekend after basis. Because I don't want to have when you come to Capitol View, all you have to use is porta potties. I don't want that to be the way Frankfort is seen.
Right.
So, but restrooms are not cheap either. So restrooms and lights and things like that, there's argument to say get those done first before you tackle the turf.
Right.
So,
Shawn, interesting stuff. Thanks for coming on and educating us on all of it. It's a lot going on.
And can people kind of find it? Is it frankfortparksandrec.com?
frankfortparksandrec.com.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
And anybody's welcome to email me or call me or stop by the office. I'd be glad to talk with them.
Great.
About these subjects.
Thanks so much for coming on, Shawn. And this is a lot of useful information for everybody. I really appreciate it.
Good.